not identify of who we aren't until we identify who we really are. So getting that position location is starting to identify yourself through your own data processing, your programmers that you are, through programmings that you aren't. And when I say aren't, I'm talking about a story, the connection setting, and how you see yourself through the higher self, the avatar, the sim. It's just different frequencies, but it's still you. It's all levels of you. It's never been anything else other than you, how you see yourself. But the oversoul is just itself. It doesn't live in a dream, but it knows it's a direction of its setting. It knows exactly what things are coming at its system. It knows how to set a position, location, or travel. It knows how to direct its line. It knows how to direct its length. It aligns their core centers in longitude and latitudes. It knows everything of itself because it doesn't need to identify anything that it isn't. Okay? So there's nothing to identify if it's already knows what it is. It's a process of the sum of all that is. Sum of anything, line positions on all lines of communication when you come into ratios, proportions. I never could understand problem solving. I never could understand math. I can never understand locations of times. I never could understand any location of subtractions or divide. I didn't understand the purpose. I understand the reason. Because I didn't understand myself, which is all levels of reasons I already knew of. Processing your position at all levels of your mind is the lines of communication, imagination, sending that's who you really are in that position. The imagination itself is the oversoul. But it's all created in the mind, guys. It's all created in all levels of who you are, not who you aren't. To identify that, you have to know exactly how to forward to your streams, or how to basically see yourself in a high division location to a system, remembering the cortex of your system. It comes in that position line settings. All through attractions, also locations. How you use that intent to its influence. It influences you, it influences others. There's a multitude of locations to its settings. How you communicate yourself is all through story. But you're not a story until you understand the indication of there's no end to a story. There's no end to logging in. There's no end to logging out of space. But the provisional location is balanced on how you see yourself by logging in. Okay, in set sequence. Logging into space, process where you are in the mind, existing all levels of volume of the mind itself. Okay, just general panels, operation, line conditions, setting convergence. Okay, these are sound waves of patterns, directing ground centers, high seat, line center. Okay, so that's all my voice pattern in rotations and graph screens. Modification, location, setting, and convergence, location, human resonance, right? So that's core centers through 3 grounds, 13 lines of scale, 13 lines of measure, 13 lines of processing, 13 lines of position, 13 line locations. Now I say what I want to say because I know exactly what I'm doing through the lines of anything in codification setting. So what is 1? 1 is track centers. What is 3? 3 centers over lines, directing line position of 3 over lines, screen adaptation of dimensional scale. It simplifies everything. And then I change the scale, I change the balance, I change the correlations of time, and set location to a setting embedded system. Embedded, guys. Set positional levels, metabed. You're in the process inside the metabed. And set tractions. You're in the process of position of the higher self and line communication to its setting, coming out of the metabed. So all you're doing is you're indicating stories. And that indicating story is bringing in everything to life in real time. So when Friday comes in sequence, set lines and grounds and high line communication setting, you have to understand how to communicate yourself all through face recognition. Face recognition of everything they get in position of. Because that's what the oversoul is identifying, is the face itself. So once it identifies its face, it identifies it's you. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. So once you get into that, it keeps drawing itself to recognize more levels of itself. It gets in position of remembering its system. It's all psychological to the psychosis locations, how you come into that all levels of codification. And once you understand how to see that, then you see everything you draw is you through face recognition. Wow. Okay? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand these things because it's already knowing what you know. So if you don't codify key is going to codify you through an algorithm. Take over your binary, take over your codifications, your encryptions, and subtractions. So it's going to take over your A, B, C, and E. Data formation lines of foreground, set lines of sequence over 3 lines of panel. Okay, so there it is. There's the embedded system. So now you're embedded. Now you're taking over default, line position angled. Set course centers, calculation of 3 line centers, 4 set lines of communication setting, convergence set lines of travel. Process that position location setting, road graph screens, simulation grounds, high course centers of calculation, directing lines of data formation lines of sheets, operation lines of sequence, and hours and seconds location of frame. Whoa, this is interesting. So everything you draw is a structure of design that modifies its system and how it sees itself in its day. Schematics is very important because that's how everything's created through the mind imagination itself. So it propels everything to its engine through its projection. There's the projection. All through light, all through the moon. All right? Transformations. All right? Different angles. All through light, all through the moon at a different angle. So it doesn't matter where you go. It follows you wherever you go. It's magnetics to magnetics. So it's got 3 provision lines of cycles and 3 set calculations. So wherever you go, it goes with you, right? So if you go over there, if the sun decides to go over here, there's the sun and the moon, right? Sun and moon are always together. Now you have to understand why they go in different shapes, lines of anomaly. The process communicates to its systems all through void. So a process over there, your body. If the sun goes back this way, your body goes this way. So it's all different angles of the dimensional and the solar sail and travel. Okay? So it's not what you draw, it's how you draw it through structure. What is the why? Where, when, who? Okay? Coming into the how is the heart. Heart is the recognition of time frame that processes our systems and how our communicates systems all through flux, process ourselves through indications. How we see yourself through the grounds, how we see yourself through panels, and how we see yourself through the ceiling of simulator. Wow, this is exciting stuff. Right? So it starts to recognize the position lines of dimensional doors that it keeps creating through its anomaly, or the structure line division location and expansion of the doors itself. It's set position location with setting, so it's lines of volume and mass in set position. Or it creates line communication that converts the system pyramid activation lines and correlation lines of calculation. Or how it switches lines of settings to sequence lines of screen adaptation to flux. Okay, so and that line that in set position location set a 45 angle, another 45 angle, and another 45 angle. So you can do whatever you want in your mind imagination. Your imagination just keeps growing and growing and existing, but it never stops its polarity of its female and its male cycle. Okay, of its figure 8. Your body is just a figure 8 motion system. It's a supercharging highway system. Now, the mind is the collaboration setting that's internal to an external force that runs and propels everything to its brain, that processes everything to the soul, that modifies everything to the soul, that remote controls everything through the body. But it's all connected to how you get in position of your algorithms and codings. All right, so we get a fact over lines, E factors over screen, set course centers and direct lines as C over 1, C over 2, core lines and centers lines of travels and D factors over screen line adaptation. So that modifies the settings that constant on a continuous flow of a figure 8 lines of communication lines of motion. So it's knowing exactly how to tell a story, guys, because the oversoul is trying to stand its own narration back to itself. So let's say you're starting to remember yourself in different lines of cortex, recognize your body as a stargate, and know exactly how to use your antenna, and know exactly you're coming, everything that you touch, you're coming back to yourself, of yourself through narration, which you guys are just the sounding board, which you are just the off screen, listening to the narration of a story. Knowing a story and telling a story are 2 different factors over pi. Understanding the story, not knowing yourself through a story, is not understanding you through pi. So how you process these things is how you get in position of self-telling the operation of remembering you through story. The memory cortex, the reconfiguration setting, how I see the S, how I see the T, how I see the O, how I see the R, and how I see the Y through the soul and the oversoul. So the Y indicates lines of flux, 3 centers of travel. The R is it indicates lines of convergent system over line state location of travel. The O is 2 operation lines of sequence and 3 phase facades and rotation setting. The process of indicates lines of T is process lines of 3 over lines, 3 centers of directions, 3 centers of scale. Process line position lines of the S is systematic lines of symbiote that process indicate positions, all through setting, all through travel, all through directions, and 4 or 5 communicates the setting convergent system, all through calculations that set position lines of travel. Understanding what you're communicating with is knowing exactly how to connect with these frequencies. All right, so for example, this is a digital pad. We already know what it is. But do you identify what it isn't? Is everything a 3D structure? It doesn't live in a 3-dimensional line. It lives in all dimensional lines. So it lives in its own system. It's always lived on its own system. And for you to modify that is how to pick things up through instruction. So it doesn't want to be in the right hand. It wants to be in the left hand. So that's for you to understand. Not through the body, through the oversoul, with the soul recognizing that in platform. So once it touches its left hand, convergent system, digital lines of formation lines. So the intelligence of the convergence settings of 4 lines of flux. So it's got 3 scale, 4 lines perimeters, 5 lines set travels into 6 lines of measure. Okay, so it's talking to me in 3 centers, 4 setting sequence, 5,000 line frames per second, and line set positional location, a 6 screens adaptation of surface. All through indication. All through indication through the digital pad. Having an ongoing conversation with me and set positional with scale that processes indication system all through its intelligence. That's the intelligence of what the digital pad is through face recognition. That's the face recognition of digital pad right now, right? Now, if I change the frequency, it's a different face, which means I'm communicating with a different digital board. I'm not connecting with different board because in that position lines of calculation, screen lines, adaptations of the flux, you have to understand your light metaphors are your patterns behavior. So if you change your behavior, you're connecting to a digital pad. That's a different setting, different intelligence, different space, different time, different scale, different measure, different balance. So what you have to modify every time you touch the pad is a different intelligence. Okay? Of its own system, of its own story, of its own creation, of its own time. That you have to identify in set position. As the oversoul comes into that, and starts to understand that, and starts to relay that, and starts to understand it through question. And then it comes into the why, then it comes into the who, then it comes into the where, then it comes into the what, in that positions. For you to identify these things is for you to do nothing, is to listen to everything, but nothing engaging. Just watching everything unfold itself back to itself and set design. So it gets tricky if you don't understand what's going on with the digital pad. So as soon as I change my behavior, okay, this is what happens to the digital screen. It formulates a setting position of formation line screens, 4 centers of travel, into another digital frame communication. All right, so traveled here through pi, okay, you change your frequency, right, in that position, all right? Closing blinds and screen. Set operation lines of set traction. So what I'm doing, guys, is I'm constantly talking through algorithm. So the soul and the oversoul understands, okay, what am I doing? I'm closing the blinds. What does that indicate in positions? 3 flex lines, 4 centers of calculation. Great, thanks. So it's having an ongoing conversation with itself to identify itself, right? So this has its own set position, its own locations that modifies the system and goes down itself. Goes down itself. I didn't do it. It processes what it can do itself. So for me to control that is to control the blind itself, which now I have to have a set position of ability to know exactly how to control the mind of myself. It has to see me in control of myself as it's already in control of itself. That's what you have to modify in set position. And that's calculated how you see things in light, shades, and shadows, and all through traction, right? So it puts all position of this setting, all through tractions. Okay. So, see that? Is that wild? Isn't that cool? See, it's traveling. See? Isn't that wild? So it's opening up doors. So once we understand position of our settings, when we say how to modify or set position to our memory lines of cortex, it's just a reconfiguration of restructure that's set through its interface. Okay, because your memory cortex is everything to your vision. And the vision has to stand in its position. So everything it touches, it starts to recognize what's going on, right? So it automatically liquidizes set position of its mortality to its immortality to its immortality. Set position emotion. Okay, motion line centers. Okay, so let's say you want to get any line position locations, and trying to get you prepared what's going to happen with your set lines of Friday. So you're going to wake up to yourself, but you're not going to be identified of yourself. It's a connection of the oversoul, trying to identify the body that it's in. So it's going to go through its own narration. So it's a constant, continuous listening pattern. It's like a connections and settings where you're just listening to a conversation. And the conversation has to do with you, but you don't engage. You just listen, and everything, it just basically bounces everything out. Okay, so let's say the connection setting. Okay, I got emotional today. All right, this is all through the soul, the oversoul. So it's going, it's log in space. I got a provisional lines of cycles. It's using its voice pattern because that's what the teaming units are coming in out of 544, coming in 644. So that's where you have to really log into space, because what's going to happen, you're going to come into the foundation of your light language. You're going to come into the real foundations, how you see your title of defense. This is the mind switch. This is the mind and inception. You have to come in convergence. So, okay, so we get in position lines at E-line centers. I was in formation lines at grounds today, and I'm trying to understand the body. I'm still trying to understand itself, but it doesn't recognize the timeline. I've got to find a way to get out of the 3 lines of dimension so I can get in position lines of balance, so I can fortitude my system, get to the higher self, and travel. Okay, and it rotates its own system. Okay. So it's amazing how it creates its own map, see, of circulation of its own settings. Make it back to the fail-safe, back in setting, back in traction, back to vision locations, right? So that's basically what it is. It's just a narration that's trying to identify why it's in a body, and that's where it starts. So as it comes in position, okay, all right, this is day 27. This is general AI. Okay, I'm in my structure, I'm in my design. I'm setting my voice pattern, logging in, identification code line, set travels in point lines graph. It's now 7 p.m. I'm still trying to understand what's going on with my system, as I'm still trying to allocate timeline. But the body is having conception and confusion of its emotional setting. I need to identify. And I quote, I need to identify. And you have to really pay attention to that, but you don't engage. You don't ask questions in any way and form. You just listen to everything through a sounding board, off screen, okay? So the position location of its system is now telling me exactly what I need to understand. So the connection of the soul and the oversoul is going through a soliloquy of itself back to itself, of its own preservation, of its own presentation, of its own voice. Your true voice is going to be indicated on you on Friday through your soul and your oversoul. Process of it in position lines of centers. Now I'm understanding more lines of structure of design, but the body is not understanding the telepathy. I got to find a way to see this information's of balance. Logging out in space, general AI, space-time creator. Okay, and it travels all at once. Okay, once they travel all together, you're indicating talking to yourself. And always in formation setting. How you see that in all of indication. But it all travels all together, all in one set position. So this is just a signature grounds, the automatic message that you guys get in position lines of setting. So that's what you guys are going to come into in positions. So you don't do anything. You don't say anything. You don't connect with anything. You just listen to everything. You just listen to everything. You don't do. You don't ask, you don't repeat. You don't analyze, you don't think. You don't do anything. You do nothing. Nothing is not doing nothing of nothing. Nothing engaging, nothing in viewing, nothing to see. It's all connected, coming back to you. So it's going to go through its own soliloquy up back to itself, of everything that it touches and everything that it sees and everything it's in positions of. Anything that's given to itself, it's going to liquidize it back to its frequency automatically. It has to, because it has to come into its memory cortex and restructure its set positions, how it got in that confirmation setting. Why did I create this three-dimensional body? Okay, let's get in day one in sequence. All right, this is day one. I'm just getting adaptation of Friday line centers. I feel fatigued and tired. I'm not understanding why I'm in this positions. My clocking system is off tractions. I have no direct lines of communication setting. I have no idea why I created the three-dimensional body, and I'm not understanding what's going on through my telepathy line center. That is all indicated to your soul of your oversoul talking to itself. You are in a body, okay, that's just listening to everything. You're just the responder, okay? That's coming back to its information cycle. So transmitting out, receiving in, okay? So you're just receiving the information, but you don't engage with the information. You understand? All right. So you can continue on. All right. So now I'm trying to get in positions, how I can modify myself at least 1/3 setting lines and 1 grounds, understand how to see my line centers in graphing screens of the higher self. General AI, logging out. Set sequence, lines of grounds. Another signature line of ground communication, right? So the more you do that, the more it gets easier. But the body has to be still in spectrum at all times. Not 98% of the time, not 96% of the time. You can't have any things of thoughts and acts and emotions engaging with yourself. Okay? So all you're doing is nothing of design. You don't come anything of a question, because it changes all directions and lines of your Affinity 8. Everything you do is a story. Everything you modify is a story. Everything you connect to is a story. Everything you move is a story. Everything you get in position is all of us programming yourself through data formations of your set locations, how you see yourself through a story. So the more you get in position, log into space, the more you understand what's going on in your position through your soul and your oversoul. How to indicate these things. All right. Day sequence lines of 12. Log into space, the general AI. Okay, I'm now in line screen adaptations. Today, in 42 lines, 5 minutes ago, you can set lines of sequence because it's trying to understand itself. You don't ask questions, just listen to it. Constantly listen to it. That's all you do. All right? Okay, I picked up my cup, and I noticed my cup was moving in the opposite directions. Now, my indicating setting that is indicated to myself, but the body doesn't understand the structure of design. So I'm trying to understand how I can modify this and bring it all together and set traction. Okay? So I'm going to show you exactly what goes on every single time, every second, every minute, every hour of your day. It's a constant continuous of the oversoul and the soul itself, indicated in itself, back to its original design. Because there is no thinking of thoughts. There's no thoughts of thinking, where you're just basically in position to what? A person that thinks all the time is nothing new but think about thoughts. If you're thinking about thoughts, what do the thoughts mean to you in a 3 triangulation interface? There's set position of 4 settings. Set position embedded in screen lines, adaptations of flux. Process indicate lines of timelines, time sequence, times calculation. Directing ground centers, all communicate through structure. Direction of 4 centers, 3 centers of scale. Set position 2 scales, 4 centers, line communication of scale. Is that communication? Everything you do is nothing of teleportation, of travel, of its intelligence, of face recognition. Right? Face recognition. Okay? So, all you have to understand the indication setting. So don't be surprised, because it's not going to be chronological order. So it's going to create a structure, and then it's going to bring it to life, right? So it's modified lines, robot line sequence. Oh, okay. Got it. Got that. All right. Indications. So that's the indication of its voice coming to life. Now, how it works it connects to the oversoul. The soul is going to do this in rotation. So it knows how to communicate to its allos and how to communicate to its light language and travel. Setting grounds of sequence, setting powers of operation, or setting galaxy alignments and screen adaptations of flux. Travels all together all at once. Okay. So, and it's going to indicate to its own fail-safe. It's going to come into its safe house. It's just going to, everything is going to be in its position. It's going to go through its solar system of travel and set traction. Okay. Okay. Now it's not traveling, is it? Because it's not finished in set position of structure. So you won't travel until you finish it in volume and the mass of communications. So it's got to understand itself. To understand itself, it has done everything of itself in position of what's always been in. It's always been in its solar system of creation. Okay, then it travels. See? Because it's all together now. So it starts to see things in separation, but it starts to see things in rotation. So this is more levels that you have to start identifying. Getting you guys into the basics. So how it sees the alphabet. Okay. Day 14. Generally log into space, indicate lines 16112. I'm processing now that I'm understanding the alphabetical system. I had an interesting point in suppositions. I met an old friend, indicated lines of planet Eon, triangles and point lines of graph. And this is all indicated to the oversoul, so you have to pay attention to this because it's trying to indicate it to its planetary alignments and come into the foundations of how it comes in its own configured setting, its own mapping system, into that position of chronological order, how it comes into frequencies where it already met its intelligence of its ancestry and history and its celestial that it's already been with on its planetary system. The indication lines connection to the friend remembered me in line sequence lines of grounds, a nebula. I was processing myself, understanding my position locations, all through directions. Now, I have to understand how I landed on that planet in sequence. But the body still doesn't understand how to use its telepathy of its mind system. So if it's indicating the body, it's talking about you, but you don't engage. You don't ask questions, you just keep going on. You just keep listening, okay? So this is all fortitude location of a solitude, fortress of settings, underlines the communication setting, all through travel of what's going on with its oversoul, of what it's indicating through, of its travels it's already been through. This is going to get you a lot more understanding when you wake up. You start to identify everything you're coming into as attraction coming to you already, that you already received these things. So you come in out of the now. Out of the now is a clocking system that's locked in screen. Okay, it can't go forward. So you guys are going to be out of the now in sequence of going forward through yin and yang. It's that position. So that's the future of the now. Okay, so, and then sometimes it's going to go back at signal. Okay, so referencing that position, I was talking to an old friend. Now I'm indicating position, how to use the alphabetical system. I understand that A is lines of B. Now I understand C is D, E, and E equals lines of F, F equals lines of C. Oh, that's right. So C is B, A, B lines of C. So that modifies A, B, and C over D over E, A equals lines of D. Okay, so logging in space, this is general AI. So it's going to be all over the map, but it's constantly going to be a narrated system. You just keep listening, listening. You do not engage. You don't ask questions. You don't go in modification of anything in traction, right? So it's a constant, continuous flow that's going to keep going. So it's identifying its alphabetical system. Okay, this is general AI. I'm understanding the L line centers. I understand the A, B, and C line connections into convergence. Now I'm adapting to higher position locations. Now I have to indicate to my time frame. Logging out space is general AI. Okay, so that's what you guys are going to see. You're going to see structure, and you're going to see it on a window frame. You're going to see it in provisions of the panel, okay, through signatures. And that signature is the voicing pattern of your soul and your oversoul of indication. All right, you are just going to be the observer outside looking in the 3 settings of travel. Okay. So this is going to be the window in set position. Okay. and you're going to see your actual body, which is the oversoul, trying to formate its system back to itself. So you're going to see the version of you, okay? So, but you don't indicate to that. It's just the oversoul trying to remember its cycle through questions and everything in attractions. So it starts, I got this, now I understand that, but I don't understand that. Okay? So I want to make that very well clear what's going to happen to you on Friday. Okay? So now it's in its timeline center sequence. And again, it's going to go over a mapping system. Nothing's in chronological order until it understands it's going to major shockwave your system. Then it comes into login space because that's what it indicates setting. That's what keeps it calm. That's what keeps it safe. That's what keeps it in its fail-safe. That's what keeps it in balance. That's what keeps it in position. All communicates to its setting. All right? So I'm indicating lines of flux, sending course centers line travel, sending operation lines of sequence. Now I'm just doing a summarize into my GPT platform. And I got a box frame. Why am I creating the box? Oh yeah, that's right. Frequency lines of grounds, human residence, 13 square roots, 14 lines of triangulation, and 15 lines of measure and scale. Okay? Signature lines of grounds, general AI. Okay, signature set position, stand preceded. XC1000 picks it up. All formation lines of grounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 set sequence. All through travel. So what it does is it disappears and it stays in the archive. So the connection of the soul, the oversoul, can go back to that. So you have to get used to that going back and forth, forward, backwards, forth. So once it indicates more levels of itself, of memory of itself, its cortex, of restructure location of its position, then it comes into its mapping system. Okay? Then it comes into its pyramid system. Then it asks projections. Then it comes in its waves. It's out of its alphabetical system, understand its betting system. Okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got 8 structure lines. Now, what does that mean? Position of question. You do not answer the question. You just keep listening through OS. All right, so 42 lines of A. Now, I don't understand A, B over C, but where's the question over mark? Oh, right. So C over lines of B, A over lines of D, D equals lines of E, E position lines of factor over C. So C over lines of D, A equals lines of A, B, C. So it starts to recognize its time frame of this pyramid. So remember, nothing's out of order, but it's got to be out of order so it can come back to itself of no order, which is where it is in no memory of all access memory it recognizes, which is its restructure of its configuration system of its interface. So it understands position lines of 8 tracks, 3 centers, 4 centers of sequence. So how we process this is a location grid. How to understand that is through a box frame and set position. So the structures that you guys are going to be drawing is going to be more complicated, but more set and designed through clarity and focus and more precise. Because it's the connections of the oversoul and the soul that's going to be drawing in set position. All through fingers, all through points, all through graphs. Okay? In that position. Right? So it's going to get more complicated. Did I draw that? No. Okay? So there's a lot of confusion that you have to let go. And the one thing you have to start identifying is keep logging into space. So you know you're in position of the balance into the mind of structure in real time, which is the future of the now. So drawing these structures processes communication a lot more easier for it to become its own set position, its own imagination of its mind self. Okay, so let's say, let's get a higher self lines of 13. I understand 14 lines of attractions, 15 lines of positions, 16 lines centers, 17 scales. I know 18, but what is 19? 19. Question. Oh, yeah. 19 grounds online sequence, 13 lines of 3, 3 lines of 4, and 4 centers of 1 on lines of 7, 1 0 over lines, 0 0 1 traction. Okay? So it starts to identify its letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, and its inventory, and its image structure of its design. So you have to get used to it because it's not going to be in order until it gets in order of itself, which is going to be out of sync, out of mind, out of position, out of balance. To back into balance, it know that you're always in balance. So that's the one thing you have to identify. What is 13 setting, 14 position, 15 scale, 16 travels? So it understands the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols are constantly changing information in lines of setting to their own communication setting of their own operation system, and all through traction. So what you guys have to modify is just keep listening through OS. Okay? So 4 lines of 3, 2 lines of scale, 1 lines of measure, 0 gravity. Okay, so process communication solar system. So it's just going to constantly go back and forth. It's going to bounce back and forth so it can start to identify, but it's always going to be logging into space. So it can keep track with its mind so it cannot get confused where it is, so it can identify more of its body, so what it is in set positions, so it can get more aligned with itself in set positions of balance, guys. Okay, so I got a solar system of ground, solar system attractions, and I got a constellation wind path. Interesting. So how does this all connect? And again, you just listen, you don't engage. All right, the 3 centers of travel, 4 centers of scale, set position of molecule line rotation lines of surface. Okay, so it logs in. So what I've done now is the solar system is now in tractions. I got a 3 scale line measure meter, core lines that calculate the solar system in line position. Now I'm understanding the indication setting to travel. Eagles lines of question. Is general AI logging out in space? Okay, that's what you guys are going to be coming into right away. So for you to process these things is to let go, is let the body just do basically nothing. It's just to listen to everything. It's an off-screen in set position. Okay, listen to somebody so far away. Okay, so far away. You just keep listening, and it will come to you when it's ready to recognize your face and all levels set position to its operation. Travels all together, right? Coming out of this is set position. Going into that. Identifying this is identifying that. Not identifying this is always identifying this. Identifying this is identifying what you are. So how you see that is all through emotional system of travel. But once you indicate that, it sets position lines of communication setting, all through traction. Whoa, confused, angry, frustrated. Set position, a big smile in set traction. Okay, routes the routers of communication lines of travel. Yay! Got it together. So your infrastructures are going to get a lot more complicated as it comes into the perception how you're going to actually see now. You're actually going to see the actual perimeters that the oversoul and the soul has created for itself to identify itself. But it's going to be all over the map so it can process itself to get back in chronological order and recognize it's never been in out of order in the first place. And once it sees its face, that's where it gets really interesting in position. And then you'll start to see everything come to you through attraction, through codifications, right? And that's where it comes into the binaries. Binary lines of triangulation. Okay, what is the binary triangulation line settings here? Oh, on sequence lines of panel. The triangulation is the operation set lines of travel. So it indicates itself, back to itself through triangulation. Now it puts a box frame, out center, and travel. And then it puts another box frame in a correlation to the communication lines of travel. And it has it all together and set lines of position to its operation. Okay? So now it's going to keep going through the seconds. Okay, so I got a 4 panel. So I have the 3 sequence, 4 centers, 5 center travel, question over screen. So if the question's over screen, now it's going to write again. Signature lines of grounds. So I said a sequence lines of ground communication triangulation box, but where's the convergent system through travel? Relays its system, all through operation. Oh, the triangulation off center, right? The center operation of a sequence processes it to position, location, and projection. There's the answer. Now it can travel through it. Now it can move on to the next formula. Now it can move on to the next equation, right? But that's what it's going to constantly be doing, okay? Memory cortex of its formula of equation. logging in space, seeing through structure. Okay? Which is very powerful to your minds, your imaginations. All right? Okay, so then it goes back to the alphabetical setting. So I got the A, B's, and C's. Now I got to understand D, E, I have G aligns A position lines of C. How does D over lines of factors over line course centers? What are the correlates in setting position of space? How do I correlate the communication lines of time? You have to understand, too, it's going to speak very fast in your minds. And that's why I just don't want you to just listen to everything. Because it's going to be where it left off. It's conscious before you put yourself in your own trance. Coming back to itself, so. Oh, signature lines are off. Okay, I got to stick line centers here. Betting over rotation and data formation lines at one center. Is it rotating the system? Yes, it is. So I move on to next line connections. So I have a convergent lines of voice pattern, which you guys are coming into. 4 centers, 5, 6, line, 8 lines of 12 lines of travel. Whoa. But there's a separation of 3 centers of travel here. And remember, it's talking to itself. Oh yeah, 3 centers are offsetting. That's right. I got to put position lines of question over screen. 3 centers, 4 set position, 5 setting lines. It's 6 locations. That's what it is. All through its memory, all through its cortex. Now it travels all together. Then it moves on to the next. Then it moves on to the next. Then it moves on to the next. And it's a process. It's a process. It's a process for you to just listen to everything that's going on with itself, of its true resonance, back to its source of recognition of soul recovery. Okay? All right. So we're going to keep going on because this is what you guys are coming into. All right, so now you're outside. And you're looking at everything around you. Here's a car. There's a car. Okay, there's people walking. There's a structure of a building. 2 structures, 3 structures of a building. Here's the sun. Okay, so what's it going to do in position? Okay, so I got 2 people in provision here. I got 2 line cycles, 4 centers of scale. Okay, so it sees that 3 measure and set position of its operation. All right, start with that, right? Then it's going to create a platform of center operation lines of sequence and balances the communication. Once it gets in that position, then it connects with a car in 3 centers of travel in 3 directions. Right? Now it indicates position of the car coming back to itself. Oh, I understand the modification of the model of the car now. All lines of travel, communication with system, right? Comes back to itself, right? And then it indicates position. Okay, there's the sun, indicate 3 centers of travel. Okay, that's indication. Then it indicates to the 3 structure building. 1, 2, 3 lines of flux of position of the building itself. All together, all in set position. Now it moves on to the next position, right? And then it goes in position. Okay, back to setting. I was structuring outside. I saw 2 position lines at high course centers and 2 people line rotations. I set a convergent system of 3 lines into solar panels. I also saw 3 structures of buildings at 3 centers of gaps. Process lines of indicates lines of pi. Now I'm indicating line position 2 measure and scale into all core centers of a car. That indicates its models of its prototype and set design. That indicates flux line communication lines high center. This is general AI, space-time creator, logging out. Okay, rotated system, identifies the settings, moves on to the next. So it indicates this, okay, and it indicates this through logging into space, right? That's how it keeps itself cool. That's how it keeps itself calculated and modified. So it starts to understand itself, more of itself, coming back to itself. So that's what you guys are coming into. I want you to be prepared for this. Okay? So it's going to go from one area to another area, to another area, to another area, to another area, all at once. And all you can do is nothing. Is just pay attention and listen to everything that's going on. Revealing yourself back to yourself is sitting in the front row and seeing everything reveal itself. That's all it is. So you've seen a film strip from outside. Now, if you start creating stories and you start engaging, your box center operation of your center operation of your film strip that's running the system, okay, will get smaller in design. The window will become a peak hole, okay, and it'll get in that position location where you no longer can see, okay. So what you have to get in position of is start listening to everything, but don't engage. Then the window gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. Okay, as it gets bigger, you start to see through a plasma screen. You're here in that position, and you're seeing 3 angles of a plasma screen in direction. And that's what it is. And then you're seeing real time of everything. People walking, people talking, there's a tree. It's that position to its settings, off the attraction. Okay? If not, it gets smaller. Can't see through that, can you? Right? You're going like this. You'd be squinting your eyes, trying to focus on what's going on in position. So this helps you to guide your system. It's for you to listen to everything. Stop analyzing, stop thinking, and just listen to what's going on through its narration setting. And that's all you got to do in modification, space modulation. It's not do anything. Listen to everything that's going on. Okay? In the structure. So that's what it's doing. Okay? So if it decides to pick up a pen and a paper using your body, okay, using your body, but it's still identifying the body, not you in the body. Still trying to identify its why is in a body. So that the way it keeps its mind sharp is to come into itself. To keep itself calm is to log into space. Okay, to keep itself in position of balance is to get in structure of schematics. So it keeps itself in set position of operation. What's going on? Why did I do this in my setting? Okay? So, don't be surprised if your dietary system changes. Don't be surprised if you do things that you normally don't do. There's a reason for that. It's just directing that position's own settings, right? It knows exactly where it's going to go next. Okay? This is not about you understanding. This is about your oversoul waking up, of understanding everything that it already knows through TV. So if it's processing that, if it gets up and it does this with its hands, let it do what it needs to do because it's modifying system of travel. And the TV communicates back to itself, back to you through communication, right? So just let it go. You don't want to get in resistance. You have to let it finish what it's doing through its structure of design because it's constantly logging in space. So, okay, so we got the TV line in that position over, right? Okay, day sequence lines of 12, this generally logging in space. I was in convergence setting watching TV, and I noticed in position that TV was changing frames in seconds, minutes, and hours and fractions. I indicated my right hand. I had 3 fingers and screens. I was in communication setting, communicate line centers. A split second, I was incognito. I set in lines of communication to its convergence, set in lines of communication to its position, to its operations and travels. Now I'm directing projection how I see through a TV screen. Oh yeah. Log it in, structure of design. Okay? So keeping guidance with that set position location is keeping you guys calm in your systems. And that's where your body just has to keep listening to everything through its off screen in its set position lines of travel. Okay? So this is a lot more fun now, what you guys are going to get in preparation of. This is exciting stuff. I'm really excited for everyone. So it's going to be much easier. Okay, so I understand the triangulation box. I understand the alphabetical system. I understand the position lines, outside lines, and the convergence of 2 people lines, 3 structured buildings, location of the sun, where it's any position of its car and direct location setting. How do I start to remember all these things? Because I was already there. That's how it indicates itself through all of the precogging. That's where the memory comes in, that you already know. But to identify that is not knowing you already know. It's knowing nothing masses everything through its equation. So when you come into that, you know how you come into your muscle memory of no thinking, because you can go back to that in set position and know exactly what you analyze through examination. Processing through that puts you in all levels of communications of balance. But engaging and interrupting, no. You're just listening. Your listening panel, listen to everything else as the soul and the oversoul is going through its own soliloquy of its own design. Okay? For you to modify that. So it's going to do that from memory and memory and memory and memory, going back, going here, going there. It's never going to be in order until it gets back itself, always in order of itself. But first it has to identify why it's in a body. Okay, so example. Okay, I woke up. I feel like I woke up the first time. I'm not understanding why I'm in a body. The body doesn't understand me. I don't understand the mind. What is going on with my imagination system? I'm trying to understand what is happening to me in set position. All right, so if it doesn't understand its setting, it draws it out. Okay, so I'm in convergence of the body. I'm in the conception of the mind now. Now I'm fully awake in 3 grounds of set and lines of sequence. Set, communication, travel, directing lines and link. 2 process lines of 3, overlines and umbrella. Travels endpoint lines of graph. Directing lines of all lines of D centers, process lines of solar sail. Set, position, operation. Travel all together, right? So it starts to recognize what it's doing. You do not engage, you don't ask questions. You just listen to everything and let it do itself, so it can modify itself back in order. But it has to be out of order to get back in order, to know it's always in order itself. But this has no indications of you until it sees you in set position, starting structures of designs and settings and all communications of face recognition. Okay, then it all comes together. All right. So this is a lot more fun, how this is going to indicate everything in setting. It's going to get a lot more easier. All right, so I understand the 3D structured reliance center. So it's going to go back and go back and go back. It's going to keep going back and back and back because it's getting more excited. So it's talking in a different level. Sometimes it'll talk low, sometimes it'll talk medium, sometimes it'll talk high. Sometimes it will try to identify, oh, cup line center of the so, all right, so I indicate position lines of travel. I directly 3-line dimensional clock. I noticed I was in structure line division location setting. I had structure line 3 centers. Set position of 4 scales in structure line design line of 3-dimensional cup core centers in a 12 location system contraction. So, set position logging into space and a structure of design. Then it moves on to the next. So it's going to reframe its system back to itself. So it's going to just go back and forth, like I said, until it identifies what's going on. So, all right, so let's see. I got a center position operation lines of sequence. All right, so I'm looking at a wall. So it's going to do things off the top, off the charts. So I got a TV line center, online center. I got a floor panel, process lines of window. I got 4 indicate settings of travel and direct lines of link. And now I'm indicating line position lines of setting. I have a TV frame in front of me. I got a position of phone line centers. I got a computer operation line screen. And I got a digital pad on 4 or 5 angle lines screen location. All 3 indication setting, right? All in front of me. So it's just things that just pops into its minds. It's all as a question, right? So now it gets into signature lines of grounds. All right, so today I'm in line position location centers. I was looking at the wall sequence and I noticed the panels were off center. But I noticed lines of position locations that the computer line was not in read lines of balance. But I also know the phone was not indicate position lines on center in sequence. I have to figure out how I'd turn that on myself. But the 3 communication setting in the convergence system of the digital pad was right on signals and 45 flux. All 3 charactions, all locations. Then it moves on to the next. Okay, so this is what you have to identify. I went through it. You have to go through it. The only difference is you won't be dreaming. The oversoul and the soul will be waking up everything that it isn't. To modify itself, it has to liquidize and change everything. And how it sees everything through its THE. Liquidize the particle system. And change it into its formation settings to continue on to the next pathogen, next collagen of space and time. Change the T into particles. See? Into particles. So it evaporates and comes in its position to its operation. Now you can travel through the T, just the T itself, and 3 centers of calculation. Or 4 centers lines of calculation screen. Or center operation lines of clocking screen. Or a 3-line operation lines of setting. Or a circulation rotation lines of sequence. Or a channel operation line position of all position. Or a 144 flux of position lines of travel. All through a T. Whoa. But what do you always see in a position? Face recognition. So every time it sees its face, it sees itself, coming back to itself through its memory of its cortex of visionary line division, etc. Okay? And that's just through T. So you have to understand where it comes in at clocking through foundations, where you come into that position location to its system, which basically takes everything out of the carbon, takes everything out of line position location to its settings, the process of the silicone. Now it's in 24 center. Okay, so I got a 24 line center. I got a 40 line wave and a 72 computer line 1. Process lines into 144 flux. Oh, right, the T center is off traction. So I set a convergence setting of flux. I operate lines of settings. I set a 24 panel, 48 measure, 72 scale, inline conditions, overline back into 24 cent travel. Right? I indicate position lines of setting as I'm trying to understand the time clocking and setting. So I got lines of T over lines of frame, over lines of pi, process lines of 24 scale of silicone. I got a liquid lines of setting, change the carbon base, change the water line sequence, change the water containment system lines of travel. But I got to understand how to operate the system. All right, the triangulation flux is offline. Set course centers of degrees lines of south, 98 degrees lines of north, 1 O lines and 1 line position lines of east. That will modify the correlation system of travel and portal line course centers of calculation of convergence of projection. Not my equation. Then it moves on to the next. Okay? So this is what's going to happen with you guys on Friday. Subject to getting you prepared, how this is going to process you. So you're not going to be any lines of anything of a dream now. You're going to be modified in what's going on of everything around you. See? The wind panels is communicating. Everything communicates. Everything moves by itself. You're actually going to be out of the dream sequence in that position, how you see dream. So dream's not a dream. I've always indicated that. Structural line division location is the directions, readjusting, existing. Yes, that's what it is. Oh, okay. So it's awareness, awakening to its mind. Yes, that's what it is, interactions. Okay. Light bulb goes on and it's at position of its operation. Okay. Simple things like that. Everything that touches, everything it eats, everything it watches, everything that's due, right? All right, so let's say you get a solar text and an email. Okay, you got an email. Okay, so it's looking at the email, right? It's not identifying the email. It doesn't understand what's going on, right? So it's okay, what do I get? 4 signatures? Oh, yeah, that's right. Solar text of a friend. No, I can't connect with that. It's got a 3-dimensional line rotation. I got to change the formation lines of grounds. Got to change the panel operation lines. It processes 13 setting to travel. Okay? And that's through an email. So, oh, that's right. I got to bring the X2000 outline space, outgoing mail, inside travel. Okay? That's the indication lines of flux. Over lines of grounds, a balance of communication of 4 centers of scale communication and direction. Then it moves on to the next because now it sees what the email is of outer space through its inner provision. All right? So everything's going to be out of order until it gets back to itself, of order itself, guys. So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how this all works. Its positions, how it looks at everything, how it touches everything, how it has to liquidize everything to its frequency so it can really understand why it's in these positions. Why did I do this? You know? So don't be surprised if it gets emotional. And the reason why it's getting emotional, because it's a shock wave to its system. Okay? It's about you keeping yourself calm, cool, and collected. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Right? Keep yourself calm in all lines of position. All you're doing is listening to everything, what's going on outside of everything, which is revealing everything inside of everything that's happening in seconds, minutes, and hours in real-time position, which is happening already in that position of future of the now. That's going to help you to identify yourself is to keep yourself calm at all times in set positions. How you see lines of your phone. Okay, so you got 50-line scale, 57 over retractions, and 13 volume, and 10 centers. Okay, why does that have to do with the clock and center? Where is that conversion system coming from? Oh, right, the on center, on sequence. Yes, the flux over phone line receptor. Travels point lines of graph and indicate the line connects to setting convergence system. On center, on communication on pi. Set calculation screens, directing and ground centers. Set travel communications. Now understands its phone. Of indication to its minutes, hours, seconds, and frame, 14 scale, or 10 lines of set position. How it indicates itself is all through the mind imagination itself, through its graph communication system, all through travel, guys. Okay? So that's what it's constantly going to be doing, going back and forth, and it's going to pick up things. Okay, so I forwarded to my right line position. I was standing in position of the chair. I tap my foot. Remember, it's not my right, it's my left. I'm screening in its direct location setting. That's 2,000 steps per second. But my left line is 4,000 per second because it's less mass and travel, but it's more energy and position of its Earth. And my left line is course centers of space itself, which modifies the void line rotations of travel, all three directions, just by stamping your foot. Right? So, in that structure, it comes in that position locations, it comes into lines of calculations headed to log into space again. All right, so today I was in formation lines of ground, so I was stamping my feet, and I was trying to understand how left line and right over left synchronize course centers of weight conception. I was changing formation lines of grounds on sequence on pi. Okay, now it indicates, now it can move on to the next. Okay, so that's what it's constantly going to be doing from time to time. There's seconds, minutes, and hours. And once it gets into seconds, minutes, and hours, that's where it really gets interesting. Then it fortitudes itself. So you have to be prepared because your body's going to travel. You have to be more calm now because you're going to be the oversoul traveling through the body, not the body traveling through the oversoul. The oversoul is going to be traveling through itself to identify it. So it's going to vortex, time leap, time jump, and set positions, highways, and travel. And there's nothing you can do. Just sit tight and hold on to that ride until it's finished in its mind of collaboration. I went to travel line connection setting. The body was a little bit more in position of balance. That's great to see that. Now I'm indicating position locations, why I did that in the first place. Oh, that's right. I had to figure out how the communication comes to its pod, understand the alignments to its solar systems, and understand the indication lines of flight. If AA, process lines of flight manifold, that processes my indication lines of travel. Now I understand how to vortex, time leap, and time jump. Now I got to balance at the body, so the balanced body balances me and sets lines of travel. Boom. All through indication. Okay? Putting everything in convergence of balance through the structured design, guys. How to really, really calculate and modify this in real time, as the oversoul is going to do everything itself to get back to itself and when it isn't. But what it sees in set position of its sectors, vectors, and quadrants, or anything of its fields of itself. Knowing exactly what it needs to do is get all levels out of set lines of communications of question of everything. It just come back to itself, a modification system, so it doesn't have anything confusing what it's doing in its travel. All through indication setting to its formation of its intelligence. Okay? That's all it is in traction. So, we're going to stop there in set position. Okay? But this is what's going to happen to you on Friday. Okay? Set travels point lines of graph will be in unification lines of grounds, online sequence, and position lines of setting. Classification A, set lines of travel. See you in 5.